We're in the town of Mercersburg, Pennsylvania, and it was established in 1750, but it wasn't really called Mercersburg till later. Before the Revolutionary War, it was quite a sleepy town, but afterwards it started to grow, and the town Mercersburg was named after General Mercer, who was a Scottish immigrant of the Revolutionary War. And after the war, all the homes down Main Street, you're looking down Main Street here, they're all pretty much made of wood and logs. And it wasn't until the Georgian movement of architecture where they started building all the brick homes that you'll see lined up on the street today. Now, Jacob Hassler is our 4 times great-grandfather, and he was an architect and a carpenter in this town. He moved here in 1815 and he died in 1848. But between those, that 33-year time span, he is said to have built more than half of the homes in this town. And a couple churches as well. He had 20 apprentices, and his work went all the way down to the Potomac. So we're going to take a look at some of these homes, and hopefully we can find some by Jacob Hassler, our 4 times great-grandfather. We're at the home of William Smith at 47 North Main Street at the corner of Main and Orange Streets. Now, William Smith's father, William Smith Sr., he was one of the first survivors to this town. And when he died, he passed his holdings along to his son, William Smith Jr. And the area became known as Squire Smith's Town. And this building here is known as the Squire Smith Inn and Breakfast. And it's probably one of the most historic homes in all of Mercersburg. In fact, this is the second home of the Smith family in Mercersburg. And the original home was just across the street. And it acted as a hotel and a tavern until it burned down. So this home is colonial Georgian style, built in the 1800s. And William Smith Jr. was the first one when he inherited this place called Squire Smith's Town. He laid out 141 lots of the town, and he called it Mercersburg to honor the Revolutionary War General Hugh Mercer. So there you have it, the Squire Smith Inn and Breakfast, and the home of William Smith Jr., who laid out the town of Mercersburg. This is the General Hugh Mercer building at 113 South Main Street, and is built by Franklin Keegi, the contractor. It's a common bond 2-story brick structure, has headers in every 7th course, and is built in 1904, and the cost was $4,308.39. And this is the home of the town Councilor George Sealer. He erected the town hall, a wood tower clock, and that costs $375. This home is the Harry Spangler home. It was built sometime between 1820 and 1825. When he purchased land that was a garden, and he built this 2-story common bond brick in the Greek and colonial revival influence. So after renting it for a while, he sold it to Frederick Waldick, who enlarged it. And years later, when the sidewalk was built, they established the Waldick Well. It was 50 feet deep, and it served as one of the wells for the community. This home is at 57 South Main Street. It's a Georgian-style house that was built in the late 1700s. And in the 1800s, a Captain Dick enlarged it and established a butcher shop and a slaughterhouse at the rear of the lot. So the brick style is a Flemish home. It has twin chimneys on either side, and the interior has 7 fireplaces. This house is at 56 South Main Street, and it's a unique recessed entry the Greek Revival dwelling was built in 1850 by Andrew Coyle. And that was also known as the Rupley home, where Mrs. Rupley once conducted school. And it's gone several changes over the years, but this home from 1850. This residence is at 49 South Main Street. It's a Georgian house with a two-story log now encased with brick. It was built around 1787, and prior to 1810, the house had no stairway. And this gave protection from the unfriendly Indians. So the occupants actually used a ladder to access the second floor. And the house shares a common wall with this stone house right here. Now this stone house is at 43 South Main Street, and it's the first full-size stone house built in 1780 by Dr. William McGaw, a distinguished soldier and surgeon in the Revolutionary War. Now this home here is at 35 South Main Street, and it's in the Colonial Revival style, and its structure is California brick, and it was built in 1906, so a little sooner than the old days. Now this home is at 25 South Main Street, and the stone residence dates back to the late 1700s, when a corner fireplace heated each room. The one-story brick addition to the rear of the property once had 2 stories, and is a discovery made when the old roof was removed. And this here is James Buchanan, and he's our 15th president, and he was born in Mercersburg in 1857. So James Buchanan, the only president who was never married, so his niece, Harriet Lane, served as his first lady. And we'll find Harriet Lane's house in a couple minutes. Now, Jacob Hassler, who was the carpenter who built all these homes, was married to Elizabeth Kiefer. And the Kiefers came from Upper Strasbourg, and still in Mercersburg are lots of Kiefers. These are little brick monuments of the Kiefers. And you'll find them here, and you'll find them over here, and even Randall Kiefer. And over here we have Ruth Kiefer, and we have Ralph Kiefer. So we have a lot of Kiefers in Mercersburg. This is called the Mansion House, built around 1790. Italian-style mansion house, was used by Marshall College from 1840 to 1845. So it's likely that Peter Cornelius Prue, while he was here in 1844, visited this house during his studies at Marshall College. This is the first house on Main Street on the north side, at 5 North Main Street. And this is the McKinstry residence of Jacob and William McKinstry. They're very good friends and devout members of the Reformed Church, and also helped establish the Marshall College. So William McKinstry was a native of Belfast, and he came to Mercersburg around 1796, where he started his life as a clerk in a general store, and he purchased a store from James Buchanan Sr., who's the father of James Buchanan, our 15th president. So he was responsible for publishing the town's first newspaper, the Visitar, which is now called the Mercersburg Journal. So this house was built in 1810 of Georgian architectural influence. Now this home is on 11 North Main Street. This home was built by Jacob Hassler, our 4-times great-grandfather, in 1847. It belongs to Judge James Oliver Carson. And the brick building replaced 2 log cabins which previously occupied the territory. There's unique eyebrows, they call them, in the attic that are typical of the Greek Revival style. And this house had the first bake oven in town. So James Oliver Carson was born in 1796. He settled in Mercersburg in 1826, and he engaged in mercantile pursuits. He's very successful. He was a member of the Republican Party, associate judge of Franklin County, and he served there for 10 years from 1856 to 1866, and he died in 1870, but he's a very staunch abolitionist during the Civil War era. This is the Lane House on 14 North Main Street, built by Jacob Hassler in 1828, and the owner, Thomas Lane. So this house is in the historic district of Mercersburg, and it's a 2.5-story, 5-bay brick building house in the Federal style. Many distinguishing features, including elaborately carved woodwork and a curved ceiling in the hallway. It's registered on the National Register of Historic Places. So the home was built by Jacob Hassler and Thomas Lane. When Thomas died, he gave it to his brother, Elliot. And Elliot married the sister of James Buchanan. So their daughter, Harriet Lane, became known as the First Lady when James Buchanan became president, because James Buchanan was never married. So this became the home of Harriet Lane, who was the niece of James Buchanan, our 15th president. So there's only 11 ladies who ever served as First Lady. Sorry. But they're without presidents, but they're all relatives to widowed presidents. So that's the story of the Lane House on North Main Street. Now this home here at 16 North Main Street is the Robert Parker home, and now it's the Fendrick Library. So it's right next door to the Lane House and is built in 1788. So Robert was a captain lieutenant in the 2nd Continental Artillery during the Revolutionary War. It's Georgian influence. The stone mansion was built of limestone and features Georgian molding and fireplace mantels with finely carved details. After 230 years, it still retains its original style of woodwork. And today, it's the Fendrick Library. This house is at 22 and 24 Main Street. Now, we don't have a name for this brick house. It was built in the late 1700s with 8 rooms and 8 fireplaces. The house has turned decorative balusters or columns with scroll work on the stairs. The facade features keystones above the lintels, a popular decoration of the colonial period. Hand-hewn beams, probably oak, still covered with bark, are found in the front of the house. A horse and cow barn with a German siding and stone foundation stand at the rear of the property. And attached to the rear is a smokehouse. This is the Buchanan Hotel at 17 North Main Street. In 1796, James Buchanan Sr., the father of James Buchanan the President, erected this large and handsome brick house. It's also where the future President James spent his boyhood. Later purchased by Judge James Oliver Carson, and later on by the McAfee brothers, who enlarged it into this Italianate style, converted it to a hotel in 1909, and sold it to C.W. McLaughlin, who named it Hotel Mercer, and later his son, Jack McLaughlin, named it the James Buchanan Hotel. It's got 8 rooms, and you probably stay here for about $200 per night, and you could dine at the attached Buchanan pub and restaurant. Now this home is at 26 North Main Street and is called Old Stones. It was built in 1785, originally known as the Fallen House, owned by Mr. McFarland. Later on, it was bought by Joseph Cowan. He enlarged the home in 1830, and he operated a carpenter shop in his backyard, which now serves as a summer kitchen. There's a smokehouse, a horse barn, an outhouse, and a water well complete on the property. So the basement of this 10-room structure served as Mercersburg savings in the 1850s. This is the Matthew Smith House, built sometime in the mid-1800s. It's a Greek revival, and once was 2 houses, and now is 1. And it has, the first floor has what's called a bourning room, which is where ladies have their babies to be born and also seconds as a nursery. It's usually right adjacent to the kitchen. So the ornate woodwork adorns many fireplaces and stained glass throughout its first story. This is called the Steiger House and is built entirely top to bottom by our 4 times great-grandfather, Jacob Hassler. Now he sold it, he built it in 1836, he sold it to Mrs. Maris, and afterwards is bought by William Waddell. Today it serves as a bed and breakfast, and it's a true regal delight. So this 5,138 square foot house has 7 bedrooms and 5.5 baths. There are 4 guest quarters, all with private baths, wooden floors throughout, kitchen fireplace, butler staircase, and a 3-car garage. A full bed and breakfast, or full breakfast, is offered to guests each morning. Handmade and antique furnishings provide comfortable surroundings. There are common rooms on the first floor for relaxation, reading, television, or simply friendly conversations with the other guests. There is complimentary wine, tea, and coffee also provided. So I'm not really quite sure why it's called the Steiger House, but the Steiger family is very influential throughout all the 1700s and the early 1800s. And you find their homes and their headstones all across this town. Thank you. This is the Steiger House, built in 1836 by Jacob Hassler, our 4 times great-grandfather. This home is at 39 North Main Street, and it's a home of Reverend Dr. Thomas Cray. And now Thomas Cray was the 4th Presbyterian minister of Mercersburg, built in 1792. It has 9 fireplaces, and one is a black marble with a Latrobe stove. The house first served as a tavern, then became a center for fashion and dancing. There's a ballroom, has 2 rooms separated by a very large door, constructed to swing upward, where it hung suspended from a hooked ceiling. So Dr. Cray was a member of the Board of Regents of Marshall College from 1847 to 1853, so he very much likely knew Peter Cornelius Prue, our 3 times great-grandfather, who attended Marshall College from 1844 to 1852. He was also was instrumental in enlisting people for Company C of the 126th Regiment of the Pennsylvania Volunteer Infantry, including his 22-year-old son. So this is the Dr. Thomas Cray house, built in 1792. So we're standing at the corner of Fayette and Orange, and in 1835, this is where Jacob Hassler and his wife Elizabeth Kiefer moved after they had their children. And all the children were raised later in this home. So we're not sure which home exactly he had, but it certainly would have been a Georgian style home of 1835. This looks like a very likely candidate based on the homes he was building at the time, and perhaps this one here was likely candidate. But the Hassler home is just a stone's throw from Marshall College, and the boys at Marshall College would always visit the Hassler home because he had very pretty daughters. And this is where Peter Cornelius Prue, our 3 times great-grandfather, met Charlotte Hassler. And they got married in 1852 and moved on to Xenia, Ohio. And they lived right next to the Reformed Church, Jacob and Elizabeth did, where they were buried. And Jacob died in 1848, and Elizabeth died 1856. This is the old Reformed Church cemetery right at the end of Fayette, at the cross street of Fayette and Orange. And this is right behind the home of Jacob and Elizabeth when they built their new home in 1835. So originally Jacob and Elizabeth were buried here, and later on in 1866 their bodies were moved up to Fairview Cemetery on the current Mercersburg Academy campus under the chimes of the old cathedral. And we haven't found their headstones in either location, but that's a story of Jacob Hassler and his wife, Elizabeth Kiefer, our 4 times great-grandparents.